The staff of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com join WVUA 23's Jenn Chapman at Wilhagan's Grill and Tap Room for an in-depth analysis of the Crimson Tide and SEC football. This is Tide Sports TV.
Welcome into Tide Sports TV here at Wilhagan's every Monday night at 6 p.m. You can also catch our replay Wednesday night at 10:30 p.m. or Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. on WVUA 23. Kicking things off, we start with the big picture brought to you by the Soup Store. Joining me from the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com, we've got Cecil Hurt. Cecil, a bye week off for Alabama. Was this more physical or mental for them to get the bye week off?
I think it was more mental. They took the weekend off, and the players were able to get away, get back home if they live close enough, sort of take their minds off football for the weekend. So I think that's important for them at this time of year. I'm a believer that the schedule should be structured where they have 2 bye weeks every year regardless. Just start it on August 29th. That doesn't bother anybody. And let them have 2 bye weeks. If you really care about the health of the players, that would be what you need to do.
In all your years of covering Alabama football, how have you seen the team respond to bye weeks?
It varies. Sometimes they come off flat. Sometimes they come off refreshed and play really well. So it's hard to predict, and you can't just say that they'll be great. They had a bye week. Sometimes you're playing well, you kind of break that momentum. Sometimes you're not playing well. It sort of gives you a chance to rebuild. So I don't think, and particularly in a game where the other team also has a bye week, I don't think it makes much difference. But I do think that the rest is important for them physically and mentally.
Well, this week they have LSU, which in the last few years has become quite the rivalry, especially with the history with Coach Saban there at LSU. Mm-hmm. With this extra time off, how does that benefit going up against a team like LSU?
Well, you're fresher. There's less injuries. Most of the guys who would have been questionable to play on Saturday, they'll be available to play next Saturday. So it helps, and it helps both sides. I mean, there's a reason why both teams arranged to have their open date before this game. So it certainly helps.
And I believe the schedule came out for next year, and it's the same deal that buys before
It'll
LSU.
be the same for a while as long as they have control over it and as long as the calendar doesn't allow you the 2 bye weeks.
And that tells you just how important this game is to both programs in the last few years. Now we have 2 top 10 teams going at it this weekend, number 7 Alabama, number 4 LSU. How are these 2 teams similar?
Well, they're both built the same way. They're both big physical, have big physical running backs, have quarterbacks who try and not do too much but are certainly capable of throwing the ball downfield or of running the football. Great athletes on both sides of the ball. Similar, not identical, but similar philosophies in what they want to do and how they want to win. So they're very much, I would hesitate to say mirror images, but they're very similar to one another.
Alabama has the top rushing defense in the SEC, whereas LSU has the top running back. But this is not by much because Derrick Henry is second in the SEC, and then LSU has the second defense for rushing defense. So clearly they're similar as well. What would you say makes them different?
Their offense is built a little bit differently. They try and really look for man-to-man matchups on the outside, throw the ball deep if you put 8 or 9 guys in the box. Kevin Steele, their defensive coordinator, has been at Alabama for the past few years, so he has a lot of Alabama influence to him. But there are some differences. They do a little bit different defensively. I don't think they're quite as strong in their front 7. They're very good, but I don't think they're quite as strong as Alabama in their front 7. So they'll bring some safeties up into the box and do some more of that. If their fullback's healthy, they run many more plays with a fullback as a lead blocker for Leonard Fournette. Alabama doesn't really have a true – Michael Niswander plays occasionally, but they don't really have a true fullback that they can use in that way. That's a difference. So there are some things that are different, but they're very similar.
There's been some grumblings. College game day will be here on Saturday, as many people suspected 2 weeks ago. The fans that are upset about this, is this really a factor and something that fans need to worry about with distracting the players?
I don't think the players are aware of it one way or the other. It happens at 8 o'clock in the morning and the game is at 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night. So the players they're not going to be out there. They don't see it. It makes for a long day for some fans, but I don't think it's a distraction for the players, particularly if you're playing a night game.
All right, moving to the SEC West. Ole Miss still has a chance to win out. I know a lot of the conversation has gone to LSU and Alabama, but what people don't realize is they could still win out in the SEC. This weekend against Auburn, they win. What did that show you?
I wasn't shocked. They gained a lot of yards on Auburn. They're still the same team. They struggle to run the ball on 3rd and short. They have a good defense, an aggressive defense. It's not a deep defense. They wear down in the 4th quarter. They're playing at home this weekend and they're favored. But Arkansas will be a tough matchup. And Arkansas beat them 30-0 last year, and there were some circumstances around that. But the fact is, they lined up and beat them 30-0. Arkansas is tough. They're physical. Alex Collins is healthy. He's running the ball well. So they'll be a challenge for Ole Miss.
And how about Auburn? They lose to Ole Miss. They were picked in the beginning of the season to be one of the top teams. So much talk about them before the season. What is happening with that program this year?
Well, I think they don't have the playmakers that they thought they would have, whether it's Duke Williams leaving the team, whether it's Jeremy Johnson not working out at quarterback, whether it's Javon Robinson, who really looked great in some limited duty against Ole Miss. And I'll be interested to see how they work him in going forward. But they don't have the playmakers on offense that they thought they would have, and that's an offense that needs playmakers. So defensively, I thought people expected Will Muschamp's a good coach. I thought people expected way too much improvement without a tremendous amount of personnel improvement from last year to this year. So that's been gradual. They did some things fairly well defensively on Saturday, but they're still not in that upper echelon in the SEC. So we'll see what happens. They've got Texas A&M, who has their own set of issues. We'll see if Kyler Murray can back up the performance that he had against South Carolina. Auburn is better than South Carolina, so we'll see how that works out.
And Muschamp given some slack since this is his first year at Auburn. However, at Florida, Jim McElwain, his predecessor, is having no problem in his first year. Is this surprising to you that he's so successful right now at Florida?
I thought Mac would do a good job. I'm not going to say I thought that they'd be a top 10 team in his first year. But he's a good coach, and they had some good players there. They had good defensive players, and defense was really never the problem for Will Muschamp. So that part of it doesn't surprise me. The fact that particularly to have a quarterback, sort of settle on a quarterback, to lose that quarterback to a suspension, still be able to come back and put your second-team quarterback, Treon Harris, in there and win, that says a lot for the way Mac handles his quarterbacks. And they're a good team. And they've got excellent athletes on defense. When you talk about Hargraves and the guys that they have up front, they're a very good defensive football team.
And lastly, we got to go to the national picture. I know you don't like to pick a top four for the playoffs, but is there a team that you see nationally that will move their way up and get into the top four?
Well, we'll see what the top four is tomorrow night. Without knowing that, it's hard to say who's going to move up and who's not. There are some things that will be talking points from what the committee does. It's still going to be a situation. There's a lot of football to be played. They're going to place a great emphasis on conference champions because that's a way to favor the weaker conferences, balance the thing out nationally. So if there are a lot of teams that are in position, if they win out and win their conference, Ohio State, Iowa, Michigan State in the Big Ten, Clemson in the ACC, whoever comes out of the pile up, the backloaded Big 12. I think the one thing that I noticed nationally, Stanford had to rely on Washington State to miss field goal at the end. I don't know that the Pac-12 is going to have anybody come out of there with a good enough record. The only team that really could, I think, is technically Utah could. Utah's not going to go undefeated. They're a pick 'em against Washington this week at Washington. They're not going to come through and win out, I don't believe. Stanford would be the only other possibility if they can get a win over Notre Dame at the end. If they can win the Pac-12 championship, then they might be in the mix. But right now, that's the conference that's going to be in a little bit of trouble. The other one that's going to be interesting to see is going to be Notre Dame. That Notre Dame-Stanford game's a big game.
And this is what makes November so interesting, is that this is when it really counts, and when some teams will fall out and some will move back up.
Yeah, and where some of the leagues that have figured out that you just play garbage for 2 months, you actually start to play some decent games.
Love this guy's insight. All right, that's all the time we have right now for the big picture, so stay with us. Welcome back to Tide Sports TV, live at Wilhagan's every Monday night at 6 p.m. Right now it's time to go inside the Tide, brought to you by Ziegler Meats. Joining me from the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com is Aaron Suttles. Aaron, we're back.
We are.
And a bye week off. Now Alabama will be back as well. The first thing we've got to talk about is Derrick Henry versus Leonard Fournette. What are the differences between these two beasts of running backs?
Well, first off, both are very good, right? And the thing with Leonard Fournette is Nick Saban calls you the best player in the country, regardless of position, which he did today. That's pretty high praise. Nick Saban doesn't dole high praise out very often unless it's warranted. I mean, they recruited him, really hard out of New Orleans. They came down to Alabama, LSU. He went to LSU, but he was a player they coveted. Derrick Henry also a player they coveted. They're both big, physical backs. I think Leonard Fournette probably is a little more complete back. He can move laterally a little better than Derrick. Derrick's great north to south, but they both are going to just beat on you for 4 quarters, and that's basically what it is.
With Leonard Fournette, one of the top candidates, if not the top candidate for the Heisman, how much does this bode for him
it's
to
huge.
Try to show up against Alabama's defense?
Like Jake Coker said during Monday media availability, even when he was at Florida State, this is a game that everyone in the country watches. I mean, it's prime time. They've pretty much, there's some night games, but for the most part, everyone that's already played their game, they're going to come home and watch this game. So it's an opportunity for Leonard Fournette to go up against the best rush defense in the country. And he's already went up against a really, really good rush defense in Florida. Florida's ranked 3rd in the SEC, top 20 in the country against the run. He put up 180 yards and 2 touchdowns at 5.8 yards per carry. So he's already passed one test, but now if that was the first test, this may be the midterm or final exam, because Alabama's front 7 is dynamite. But Leonard Fournette, and what people don't talk about with Leonard Fournette is his offensive line. I mean, they're opening huge holes. He's averaging 6-7 yards sometimes before he gets touched by a defensive player. So, but Alabama will be the stiffest test defensively he's had today.
And Coach Saban wasn't the only one to say he's the best player in the country. Reggie Ragland said it today too, and he didn't just say best running back; he said best player.
Right.
And that speaks volumes about what the competition thinks about him. But he also said we need to wrap him up just like everybody else.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, in the first quarter, second quarter, when you're fresh and your arms feel great, tackling isn't that big a problem. But in the fourth quarter, after you've been tackling that guy, and your arms are sore and your chest is sore, it's more of a mental. You have to force yourself to do it because your body is kind of breaking down and doesn't want to do it anymore.
And this game, especially in the last few years, has been known for its physicality.
Yeah.
How do these two defenses and these lines go against each other? Well,
LSU is more speed on defense, and Alabama is size, and Alabama is deep. LSU, it's splitting hairs how good they are because they're 1-2 in the SEC in rush defense. It may come down to passing. LSU has given up some plays through the air this year. Alabama has been up and down in their passing offense. But from defensively, it's a 4-quarter game. You better strap your chin strap because they're going to beat the tar out of each other.
Now, I know Les Miles was asked this today, and he kind of blew it off a little bit. Mm-hmm. He has Kevin Steele as a part of his staff who was with Alabama, and he basically said it doesn't matter. They look at film. Is that really true, or does it help to have somebody who was on the other team's staff?
No, it certainly helps because he knows the way Alabama coaches think. He knows their personnel to a certain extent. Although it's a new quarterback this year for Alabama, it's a new running back, it's a new wide receiver. So it helps a little bit in terms of familiarity. But if Alabama doesn't change some of the stuff up they're doing, that's on them. They've had a week to do Q&A, to self-scout what their tendencies are. So it'll play a little bit of a part, but not much. And you remember Alabama's already gone through this once this year with Jeremy Pruitt at Georgia. He had been on the Alabama staff. He was familiar with how Kirby Smart and Nick Saban like to run their defense. So it's up to Nick and Kirby to change things up a little bit.
We've talked weekly about the Tide's special teams and how they kind of need to get it together, and when games it will really matter.
Yeah.
Is this where LSU has an advantage?
They do. They're really good special teams, especially return game. They're outstanding. But I will say this, everyone has this perception that Alabama special teams are pretty bad, and they've had moments when they weren't good, particularly Texas A&M that kind of stood out. But do people realize that Adam Griffin, he started off the season 0 for 4. Since that time, he's 10 of 12. So
hey, who said stay with him?
Yeah. So he's quietly, I know everyone's down on him, but he's quietly made 10 of his last 12 field goals. The last 2 games we've seen J.K. Scott kind of round into the form that made him an All-American as a freshman. So they're playing better. But, yeah, I would tend to give the special teams nod to LSU. They seem to be good over there every year. And just like against the Florida game where they faked the field goal and scored the game-winning touchdown, you never know what the Mad Hatter might do in special teams.
To end that game. Well, now we've got a primetime game, which no surprise, I think everyone thought it was going to get picked as a primetime game. What does that tell you about this rivalry, what it means to the fans, and what it means, again, nationally, about people outside the SEC wanting to watch LSU Alabama?
I know it's not viewed as a traditional rivalry in college football, but I believe this is the 5th straight year it's a primetime game, which tells you that across college football, people want to watch this football game. The ratings are spectacular for CBS when they broadcast this in prime time. It's going to be a lot of people. It's going to be a long day of tailgating with College Game Day on campus. It's just one of those games that, like Jake Coker said again, no matter where you are, you want to see Alabama LSU because it's big boy football. No trickery, not much trickery. They're going to run the ball right at you, and what you see is generally what you get in this game.
And the stakes are high for this game as well. Yeah. LSU is undefeated.
Right.
Alabama has the loss to Ole Miss. Ole Miss still could win out in the SEC, but the SEC West right now is up for grabs amongst those 3 teams.
Yeah.
And this game, I know Ole Miss will be watching. It means so much. How high are these stakes right now?
Yeah, if you look across the way at the East has already pretty much been decided. At the end of October, it's over. Florida's going to Atlanta. The SEC West is up in the air, and Ole Miss could win out. They got a really difficult schedule to close out. If they end up representing the West, they will have earned it because their schedule is completely backloaded and it's tremendously tough. LSU's got some tough games too, but Alabama, if it loses with 2 losses with Ole Miss and LSU presumably having the tiebreakers, it would pretty much put them out of contention for the West.
All right, let's go there for the fans then. Tell me best case scenario if they win, best case scenario if Alabama loses.
Well, for Alabama, I think like it pretty much has all year, they got to protect the football. You protect the football and you can run. Listen, you're not gonna rip off 250 yards rushing against LSU's defense. They're just that talented. But you have to stick with the run. You have to protect the football. And if you get an opportunity to make plays in special teams, especially points, you got to make those field goals. You got to cover. To lose, I think it's the exact opposite. If you turn the football over, that's been the Achilles heel of Alabama this year. If they're playing well, they're protecting the football. When they struggle a little bit, it's when they're turning the football over.
And 2 things we've heard all season long, Leonard Fournette is the best player in the country. We've heard that from multiple teams. We've also heard from multiple teams that Alabama has the best defense in the
strength
country.
Strength on strength.
Yeah, and we say SEC, but really it's country when a lot of these other teams bring into it. So it will be exciting to see how it ends up playing itself out.
Can't wait.
All right, when we come back, we're going to answer your questions from the TideSports.com message board, so stay with us. Welcome back to Tide Sports TV. Now it's time to answer your questions that you posted on the TideSports.com message board or that you tweeted at us at Tide Sports TV. The first question, there are job vacancies at South Carolina, Southern Cal, and Virginia Tech. Among those going into next season, which is the most attractive, and is there a chance Kirby Smart will take one of those? Who wants to start with that big one? Cecil, we're looking at you.
Well, first of all, I don't know why you leave out Miami, which is also vacant. So, to me, probably behind Southern Cal, I think Miami's second. I saw somebody say that Virginia Tech was a better job than Miami. It's, Frank Beamer's done a great job up there, but there's no way, shape, or form that Virginia Tech's a better job than Miami. No. So, of all those jobs, Kirby Smart's a hot name. He knows the region. People in the SEC are impressed with him. He'll come up at South Carolina. He'll get a look at Virginia Tech. I wouldn't say he's the front runner, but you never know who a president's interested in and who they're going to hire. And we're probably not through with vacancies in Power 5 conference college football.
Yeah, I'd say Southern California is probably the best job. Private school in Southern California with that recruiting base. Southern Cal is the best job open right now.
All right, what is your take on the Miami-Duke final? Now that the referee staff has been suspended, there's a little help on that answer.
Aaron gets to answer first.
There you go.
Yeah, craziness. It's fun to watch a play like that, but you can't help but see all the mistakes that were made by the officiating crew. And look, they're taking a lot of heat. It's not easy. There's 22 guys running around, but that's what you're paid to do. And it wasn't as if they missed one call. They missed multiple calls. So it's tough to see Duke lose that way, but hey, those are the breaks sometimes. I thought it was pretty telling. It wasn't, 14 hours later they'd already suspended the crew for 2 games. So it tells you how egregious the mistakes were.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, officials are human, and they're going to miss calls, and they didn't handle that situation particularly well at the end, either in execution or in explanation. But people who say that Miami didn't win or that Miami should forfeit, they need to go and take a philosophy class and learn about the concept of causality, which is that it's not just the last play of a football game that affects the outcome of a football game. Generally speaking, there's 163.2 plays in a football game, and every one of those 163 plays contains some element that, if it were different, would change the outcome of the game. And picking the last one and saying, oh, well, this happened on the last play, and if it hadn't, well, what about Duke's last offensive play? What about Miami interception that's overturned by a pass interference call? Are you going to review every single call in every single game and let the conference office decide on Monday who won the game? You can certainly say mistakes were made by the officials because they're human, but there's a huge difference in that and saying, well, we can fix this. We can just cause the team that won on the scoreboard to forfeit. I'm a big believer. I'm a non-atheist when it comes to scoreboards. Scoreboards impart divine wisdom as to who won and lost the game. And Miami won the game, and Duke lost it. And Duke needs to and I hate to generalize and say Duke, but people who think that you forfeit because of the last play of a game or you change the outcome don't understand football.
And that outcome will not change. The next question, will Mark Richt at Georgia stay next year, or is he on the hot seat?
That's a question. Let's see how they finish out the year. First of all, it depends on what he wants to do. He didn't seem particularly enthusiastic about coaching in Jacksonville to me over the weekend. He's got a lot of credit built up with people at Georgia. He's very popular off the field. If he really wants to stay, really goes to the president, the athletic director, the trustees, and said, I know I can turn this around. We've got a 5-star quarterback coming in, then they'll probably listen to him because they've listened to him for 10 years now. They hadn't won the conference in a decade at a school where you should win it about every third year because you have better access to more talent than anybody in the league with the possible exception of Florida, and you don't have Florida State and Miami in your state.
And he's had how many seasons with 10-plus wins as well? So.
Yeah, I think he's built, like Cecil said, he's built up enough goodwill with the people that matter over there. It depends on, it's up to him. But I know that if you're a Georgia fan and you haven't capitalized on the fact that Tennessee's been down for a long time, Florida recently has been down, and you don't win SEC East titles in a weak SEC East, it's hard to stomach. We just talked about it. The East is over, and we just got to November. And you're Georgia, you've got all that talent you recruit year in and year out. As Cecil mentioned, the amount of D1 players, the FBS players that Georgia produces in that state, and you get first crack at it, and you're not winning the SEC East. It's one thing to lose to Alabama, LSU. It's another thing to get beat out by Missouri and in Florida that no one really expected Florida to be that good this year.
And that's all the time we have for this week on Tide Sports TV. Next time you'll catch us, and we'll be recapping what happened between this LSU-Alabama rivalry, and we'll see if Alabama gets their 5th straight against LSU.